Andreas? Yes. Okay, cool. So voice is okay, camera is okay, slides okay? Yeah, everything's fine. That's great. Hi. Oh yeah. To follow on Regina's idea, can you type in where you're watching this from, please, and grab yourself a cup of coffee. Rio, São Paulo, Recife. Ai, saudade de Recife. Paulo, São Paulo, Buenos Aires, BH. Saudade de BH também. Rio. That's great. Brasilia, that's my hometown. Miss Brasilia. The first thing I'm going to do after this whole mess is done is traveling to Brasilia to see my family, my dog. Right? Oh, hi, Bruno from Natal. Santos. Okay, so everyone, so I'd like you did not get a certificate. Oh, well, talk to Disal folk. Teresina. Okay, so just so we can start, I'd like you to have a notebook and a pencil, pen, whatever, so you can scribble on, or a notepad, like a tablet, if you're used to taking notes on tablet, because there's this short task I'm going to ask you to do like throughout the session. Is that okay? Tell me when you get a piece of paper and a pencil so we can start. And if you haven't done, if you haven't written on the chat where you're watching this from, please do. Goiânia. I'm ready. That's it, Gabriela. That's the idea. Born ready, right? Okay, so folks, welcome. It's Frozen. Oi da Inglaterra. Oi, Lucy. Hi. Rosana from Recife. Hi, Rosana. Minas. Okay. All right. So everyone's got a notepad and a pencil or a pen. Yeah. All right. So today's topic is andragogy. Have you ever heard this before? Nope. Yes. Okay. So I chose this. What do you see in this picture? Like, why do you think I chose this picture to be the cover of this webinar when talking about andragogy and teaching adults and teaching kids? A boy that looks like a man. Yeah, that's the idea. So today's webinar is, the focus of today's webinar is on andragogy, which is the teaching of adults, which the reason for me choosing this picture is that showing that, I mean, this might be obvious, but it's the focus of this webinar, is that teaching that adults are not grown-up kids, right? And then we cannot use the same techniques and the same principles that we use when we're teaching kids and teenagers when we're teaching adults, right? Adult education, yeah. So I think we should start with the task. Okay, so we'll start with this true or false. If you have your cell phone, I think this is even easier. Get a picture of this slide. And before we move on, I'd like you to choose true or false for these sentences. You don't have to share your answers on the chat. If you want to, feel free, but you don't have to. I'd like you to take notes of your answers and see if your answers change throughout the webinar. Okay? At the end, we're going to check these answers. Okay? I'll give you 1 minute for you to do that. Tell me when you're done, and we'll move on. Hi from Recife. Okay? All right, so we're going to move on. And then throughout the session, I'd like you to revisit your answers and see if you got everything right from start, or if your answers will change through the session. Okay? You cannot hear anything. I think it might be like a problem in your, like, maybe a setting. Like, try changing the volume on your computer, maybe. You know? Done? Okay, cool. So to start off, we should talk about what andragogy is, right? So andragogy, according to Cambridge Dictionary, is the theory, methods, and activities involved in teaching adult learners. If you Google pedagogy, you see that usually the the definition we get for pedagogy is general education. It's teaching in general and educating people. I find it important to differentiate or to break this umbrella term of pedagogy into the group of andragogy, so that we know that the teaching of adults, the theory, the methods, and the activities involved are different, right? So I think it's important to make it clear that pedagogy and andragogy are not the same thing, right? So differences between andragogy and pedagogy. Well, mostly there are many differences, but we're going to attack three different fronts of these differences. First off is affective filter. Do you remember who came up with the theory of affective filter? Like, who was the first person to talk about it? Yeah, Mr. Krashen, right? Stephen. So the idea of affective filter is that people may have this emotional barrier that stands in the way of their learning. So the idea is that for you to learn something, you have to be with this emotional barrier lowered so that learning can take place. Why is this? Why did I choose to highlight this as a difference from young learners and adults, for example? Is that young learners, they do come with an affective filter. Like, both groups of students, they have this emotional barrier that might hinder learning. But adults, they come to class as full grown up human beings. They usually have a job, and they are respected in their work. They're respected in their families, and then they come to class, to a language class in which they're not able to express their feelings and their ideas, and this might increase this affective filter, and then learning will not take place. So the teacher should be skillful enough to help adult learners lower this emotional barrier through, for example, activities which students will be successful. Yes, report, it's big deal for affective filter. Activities that students will be successful, like right from the start, is a good strategy to help lower this affective filter, right? So working on making students feel comfortable in class and comfortable with the teacher, comfortable with each other, comfortable while being corrected, right? Some adult students, they don't like being corrected. Some adult students, they say they like being corrected, and they want their teachers to correct them more than they usually do. So I think it goes a long way if you talk to your teacher, and if you talk to your students and you ask them how they would like this correction interaction to be carried out. Like, do they like to be corrected on the spot? Do they want to be corrected after the activity is done? um, I mean, you're the language expert in the class. Yes, be flexible, absolutely. um, that's my whole point. I'm pretty much done, thank you. Yeah, the idea is be flexible. You're the language expert. You're the one who knows how teaching and learning works. But if you give your students voice and you hear what they have to say, they might help you do your job better. right? So rephrasing usually helps. Definitely. Another key point is motivation, which I think it's connected to affective filter. Adult learners, they might come to class with this. I don't think people are still using these terms anymore, like intrinsic and extrinsic motivation, right? But adults, they have this instrumental motivation, which is, according to Thornbury, it's motivation to learn the language to do something, right? So, for example, they have this motivation to study the language because if they get a higher level of English, they will get a job promotion. They will get a new job, or they need English to get a certificate to study abroad, right? So there is an external motivation to this situation of learning English, right? However, though, I believe that adults, they come to class. Usually, adults come to language classes, to English classes. Yes, can you all hear me? Okay, cool. Wow, imagine if I were staring at the screen and talking to myself. Yeah, great. So adults come to class usually after having tried to learn the language, right? It's very rare, in my opinion, at least I haven't met a single adult student. This is from my experience. I'm not saying that this doesn't exist. But I don't think I've met a student, an adult student, who has never studied English before. So usually what happens is that adult students, they come to class after 4 or 5 courses, right? And these 4 or 5 courses, they were met with failure. They didn't manage to learn the language, and this is, well, obviously this is why they're back in school, they're back in your class. So students might develop what we call learned helplessness, the idea that because of so many failed attempts, like this streak of failure, this streak of frustration, you don't you feel like you're not able to learn, right? There is this tale. I don't know if this is real. This would be very cruel, but I think it illustrates the idea of learned helplessness. Um, there is this baby elephant that, in order for the baby elephant not to escape, like the circus, they tied a rope to the elephant's leg, to one of its legs, and tied it to a stick, like a small stick, and put it on the ground. The baby elephant tried moving away and tried escaping, but the string and the stake were still like too strong, holding the elephant back. And then as the elephant grew and tried escaping and being these attempts being met with failure over and over again, when the elephant is big and full grown, it stops trying to escape because it learned that it can't escape. So I believe this helps illustrate the idea that some of our adult students may have, or even some of us may have, the feeling of, oh, I'm not going to buy a skateboard. I'm already 35. I'm not going to learn how to skateboard. Because maybe you tried and failed over and over again, that you learned that you can't, which is a myth. We know that if you're still breathing, there's still room for improvement and learning, right? So some adult students, they come with this idea that they can't learn. Like, if there's a will, there's a way. Yeah, beautiful. hmm wow, I like that. And think of it, like, raise your hand if you've never had a student who came to class saying, oh, teacher, I can't learn English. Ah, eu não sirvo para isso, eu não consigo aprender inglês. I've had many students saying that, and it's really sad, right? So, yes, we're not coaches, we're not psychologists, but teachers still have this job of nurturing students' motivation to learn, right? So I hate the language. I'm too old for this. Definitely, Patricia. Yeah, this idea that, oh no, I'm too old, I can't do it, right? So there's the issue of motivation. And there's also a difference, like a huge difference in cognition. So adult students, they have fully developed brains. So adult students, they're able to deal with abstract thought, with metaphor, with language that is not embedded in the here and now situation. So you can get adult students to analyze patterns. You can get adult students to imagine situations and imagine characters and imagine purposes that are not in the situation there in the classroom, right? The best teachers naturally become shrinks. You think? I don't want to be a shrink. I like being a teacher. Okay, so from these differences, I think we can draw a couple of principles that maybe we should keep in mind when approaching adult students and teaching adult students. So, for example, one of the principles could be adults, they can usually handle abstract rules and concepts. Going back to the idea of fully developed brains and a developed cognition, adults, they can handle abstract rules and concepts. So, and they usually benefit from it. If you've been teaching adult students for some time, you probably heard your students asking you for rules and for those language formulas that we sometimes build, like subject plus something, which might be against your principles of language teaching, learning, and language acquisition. But if your students are asking for that, right, maybe some translation, if students are asking for that, it's probably because it helps them, right? So if your students are asking for the rules, if students are asking for the concepts, maybe give it to them. Maybe giving it to them might help them learn the language better, or at least make them feel heard and not completely ignored by their teachers, right? Because if you feel like, oh no, I'm the language expert, I don't teach grammar deductively. We're only going to learn grammar inductively because this is what I believe in. And your students feel that you're not there to compromise, right? Maybe this will again increase their affective filter. They'll have this emotional barrier, as in, oh, the teacher is the expert, he doesn't listen to me, right? So it might be a bit more difficult for you to approach this student, right? I'm not saying again that you should teach grammar to students through formulas. That's not the point, right? But if you like teaching grammar inductively, I would suggest that after you do the whole inductive process, inductively again, get them to build the rules of the language and have that on the board, just so that, okay, so the teacher, we've been through this discovery moment, this guided discovery moment, but at the end, the teacher, like, I have a rule that I can copy on my notebook. Like my adult students, they usually like copying rules on the notebook. Some rules come in handy. Yeah, why not, right? That's the thing. Listen to your students, right? They know, or they have an idea of how they like learning or how they like studying. Um, well, again, adults have a better developed abstract thinking. So these adult students, you can have them imagine situations, you can have them imagining characters. So you can have full role plays with a very strong context. So instead of I don't know, telling students to talk in pairs and tell your friend about your routine, which has a very weak context because there is no reason for this. How many times do you approach people in the street, or do you approach your friends and you tell them about your week or about your routine, right? It's very unnatural. So with adult students, you can get them to imagine full context, as in, I'd like you to role play a conversation between a police officer and a person who's being mugged, and you're going to the mugged person, the victim, you have to describe the situation to the police officer. So you can include this element of appropriacy, of formality, of students choosing the best words, right? So focusing on meaning, but also focusing on form, Alan, definitely. Yeah. um, they benefit from clear goals and purposes. um, through a through some years of my teaching practice, I thought that hiding the goals of the class or of the lesson from students was a good idea. As in, we're going to come to class and students don't know what they're going to learn. We're going to have this very engaging interaction with videos, with conversation, with listening, with some exercises. And then at the end of the class, they will feel that they learned something. And I wanted to keep that a secret from students. I don't know why I had this idea. Maybe because of the whole inductive teaching thing. So maybe I took that too much to the letter, as in, okay, so everything is going to be inductive, and my students are not going to realize what we're doing. But I believe that with adult students, telling them what we're doing and why we're doing it is, as Sonia said, it's vital. Because if students know why they're doing what they're doing, they are likely to put in more effort and pay closer attention into, you know, I think that's the key. It's if you know why you're doing what you're doing, you're going to put in more effort, right? Even if the activity itself is not very engaging, it's not intrinsically motivating, but knowing why you're doing what you're doing and understanding the steps of the class. The idea is not that you teach your students about methodology, but telling your students the goal of the lesson and how this activity is going to help them get from point A to point B can help them understand your thought process. And even if the activity is not engaging enough or not intrinsically motivating, they will endure the activity and they will work towards the goal, right? Because sometimes I believe that wanting to create very engaging and intrinsically motivating lessons should be a goal. But let's be fair, it's very hard to do it every class. If you're teaching 10 groups day in and day out, planning a very engaging, very intrinsically motivating lesson is very difficult, right? And sometimes, if you just tell adult students why they're doing what they're doing, and the activity is not fun and it's not engaging, they will put in some extra effort because adults, they have discipline, right? So I'm not doing this because I'm intrinsically motivated, but because I have discipline and I know that this is going to help me get to the goal, and the goal is motivating. The goal is intrinsically motivating. And also, adults have longer attention spans when compared to children. If you teach young learners and adults, you know that you'll notice that when you're teaching kids, you have to have very short activities, and you're going to have many activities in a lesson, right? So that you get circle time, and then there's you sing a song, and then you get the flashcards. You tell a story with the flashcards. 5 minutes. They go to their tables, table time. They do a craft on their tables. They come back to the circle. They sing another song. There's a limerick, and then you fill the class with these small sized, like bit-sized activities, because children it's hard for children to keep focus on one long activity. With adults, it's the opposite. You can have very long activities, not very long activities. You can have longer activities that would that would go from preparation period, thinking time, rehearsing, and then task. And then you give them feedback on the task, and then they do the task again with another peer. So you can have longer task routes instead of very choppy activities. And from my experience, again, adults, they profit a lot from these activities that are very well structured with, say, with a beginning, with a preparation, with thinking time, etc. Gabrielle is asking, oh, by the way, if you type your questions as questions in the chat, they'll show up to me at the end of the webinar. So Gabriela asked, you're talking about regular class in the classroom. How can we do it on online ones? Um, hmm. This activity cycle, I think it works, Gabriela, with online classes as well. If I'm wrong, like, please shout. But giving students this preparation moment so that they can think of what they're going to say, and then giving them time to rehearse mentally or with a peer so that they feel more confident when performing the task. And then you give them the task, you give them feedback on what they did, and you get them to repeat the task so that they can see development from the first time they tried the task and the second time they tried the task, right? I think it's doable online as well. I don't see why not. Maybe if you want them to collaborate in this preparation moment, maybe get like an app in which you can get brainstorming. What's the name of that? Padlet, right? You can use Padlet, and then, right. You can use Padlet for, for brainstorming. So students just jot down ideas, and then they will have like this whole board with ideas so that they can think of what they're going to say and how they're going to say it. Because if you give students time to think of what and how they're going to say it, students are more likely to are likely to be more fluent, more accurate, and use more complex language when carrying out the task. So thinking and preparation time is highly undervalued, in my opinion. Okay, and the fifth principle is that adult learners cannot be used as an umbrella term. Because if you say adult learners and you're pulling together all adult students, all students who are 18 plus, you're going to have characteristics that differ a lot from each other. For example, imagine a 23-year-old student, he's an adult, right? Who's just left university. And you get this student together with a, say, 60-year-old student who's just retired. Their goals and their motivation for being in class are completely different. They have different learning characteristics. They have different learning preferences. They have different backgrounds, different life experiences. So it's very hard to pull in adult students as an umbrella term, right? So I think we should, whenever we want to like closely address adult students, we should think of what we should narrow it down. So what kind of adult student are you talking about, right? Are you talking about adult students who are trying to get in university, or students who have just graduated, or 35 to 40-year-olds, right? Eloisa, I think it's Eloisa. Yeah, Eloisa talks about ageism. If you don't know Eloisa, do follow her work. She's great when talking about ageism and learners, older learners. So, okay, and then we'll analyze some do's and some don'ts of teaching adult learners. Don't take this to the letter, because again, this is based on research and also in my experience. So, oh, I think it's Eloisa Duarte. Can I give you her last name like soon when we finish? I'll write this down because I don't know her last name. Eloisa. I'm gonna find you her last name. Don't worry. Okay, so these do's and don'ts are based on research and based on my experience. So don't take them to the letter. First off, show respect. This is obvious, but it's showing respect for students struggling to get their ideas out, right? So adult students, they have fully functioning brains and cognitive abilities, and they might come to class, they come to class with their heads bustling in ideas, and they really want to talk and communicate and express complex feelings and complex ideas. And in English, in a second language, they're not able to, right? So I would avoid, for example, discussion activities in the class for adult beginners because they will have very complex ideas that they're not able to express. In my opinion, teachers should absolutely talk about, say, racism in class. But if you bring such a topic for a discussion to an A1 or A2 group, students will not be able to express themselves and their ideas because their ideas are much more complex than the language that they have under control. So they won't be able to go there, and they might be very frustrated, right? So I would avoid discussion activities till students get to B1, B1 plus. Systematizing language, as we said before, students, adult students, they like seeing crude grammar. Again, oh, definitely Bruno França. Like start with controlled activities so that students feel more, say, more confident and more comfortable with the new language, with the target language, right? So that they can, so you scaffold this so that they can express their ideas more creatively at the end of the lesson, right? Definitely. So systematizing language is, well, after you go through the whole inductive process, if that's how you like teaching, and if that's part of your principles, do try systematizing language at the end so that students can look at the board and see what they need to use in that controlled practice or in that task that they're doing. Train learners. If you're familiar with the term of learner training, if you're not, we're having a Troika course on Sunday about learner training with Guilherme Pacheco. The idea of learner training is training students, training learners to be better learners, right? So you'll be teaching students to learn better. So when you train students, say, on how to approach authentic audios, so let's say your students, they like listening to podcasts, but podcasts are too difficult for them because it's authentic material. Teaching students techniques such as listening for gist, getting the main idea, inferring meaning from context of words that they don't know. These are techniques that students will use, that they can use when listening to authentic material. And they will feel more empowered to approach this authentic material, even when they're not in the class, which expands their exposure time and contact with the language, which will help them with language acquisition, right? Tell them the reasons. Again, tell them why you're doing what you're doing. So I've told students why we're repeating. Like I had a student who asked me, teacher, why are we repeating this? And I told him, well, look, I believe that when we repeat sentences, it helps us automatize language. I want you to get your tongues around this new chunk of language, and I want you to be able to produce it without thinking about it. So, for example, how long does it take to get there? This is a chunk of language. This how often do you manipulate and change the pieces of this chunk, right? Not often. So this chunk of how long does it take to get there? should be taught as a full chunk, right? And if you tell students, look, we're doing this because this might help you automatize your process of speaking and make you more fluent, they will feel, okay, I don't like repeating, but if I repeat according to my teacher, this will help me with my pronunciation, this will help me with fluency. So yeah, I can do that, right? Adults, they even though they don't like the activity, they might see the point and carry the activity out even though they don't like it. Again, not saying that you should do lots of activities that your students don't like, right? Because this can be like very demotivating. That's not what we want, right? Give them choice. Definitely, this is not something specific to adults, right? If you give teenagers and kids choice, I think we're only going towards the idea of student protagonism, like how student centered is a class in which the teacher does the planning at home, chooses the target language that students are going to learn, chooses the controlled practice task, chooses the free practice task, plans it all alone at home, gets the class and delivers the class. How much student centered is that? Because it's pretty much the teacher who has chosen everything. So, how much protagonists of the learning process are the students? Because it seems that students are simply playing a part and not really writing the script, right? So giving students choice would be, for example, if you have shy students or very extroverted students, say after we do this whole presentation, control practice, etc., and you get to the final task, like a freer practice moment, you tell students, look, you can demonstrate your learning through a video, through a discussion, through an audio recording on WhatsApp, or through a paragraph. How would you like to do it? You can get students to vote for their choice, and then the whole class does something together. Or you can have students choosing how they want to express their ideas. And then each individual student is going to pick an activity that they feel the most comfortable with, and then you can get students together. So these students, they want to write paragraphs, get them in a station, like get them in a big group to work with their paragraphs. Oh, and these students, they want a discussion, so they'll probably need you to mediate this discussion. So get them in a small circle, and this is the group you're going to be, well, monitoring more closely. This group wants to record a video. Maybe they don't need the teacher that much, and that group is going to record an audio like a podcast or something. So, and then you can move around the stations, making sure that all students are on task. And if they need your help, they will all be focusing on the communicative goal of the lesson, but they will be doing something that they chose to do. So they'll be more comfortable with their choice. If possible, give them more than two choices, because sometimes like the two choices that students have is not really what they want. So usually something that can be done, say, more individually. So if a student is not feeling very talkative today, so something that they can do on their own, on their desks, right? We all have those days, right? That we don't want to chat with people, but I still want to go to class because I don't want to miss class. But I don't want to join this group discussion and share my thoughts on this issue. Something that students can do in pairs, something that students can do in groups. So I think this would be like the trifecta. Something students can do individually, something students can do in pairs, something students can do in groups, so that they can choose what they want to do. And establishing clear goals. So, what's the goal of the lesson? So, I think this should be after hello, students, how are you doing? This should be like the second sentence. So, today we're going to learn how to tell a funny story of what happened to your friends at a bar. This is what we're going to learn today. So, students know what their goal is, and they can be held accountable for that. So at the end of the lesson, when you finish the lesson, you can get students in a big circle. You sit down and say, so how do you feel? Do you feel you achieved the goal? To which extent do you feel that you have achieved this goal or not? What do you think we need to revisit? Because if you don't tell students what the goal of the lesson is, it's harder for you to explain the reasons of the activities, right? And some don't oversimplify. Yes, we have to adapt our language again on Krashen's idea of comprehensible input, I+1. Yes, we have to grade language. However, I feel that when grading language, that sometimes we oversimplify. And in my opinion, and in my experience, what gets oversimplified the most is connected speech. So teachers will oversimplify the language because they want their students to understand. This is, I mean, it's the best of intentions, right? We want students to understand what we're saying. We want them to participate in class. So we do that very kind-heartedly. But if we always simplify language as in not connecting speech, how do we expect students to learn connected speech if all or most of the input that they get in class is not connected, right? So maybe simplify language in terms, it becomes not natural and students sound like robots, right? They don't connect sounds, they produce each and every sound of every word, right? They have no knowledge of strong forms and weak forms and intonation. So I would suggest that when simplifying language so that students can understand, I would rather choose simplifying vocabulary, as in choosing higher frequency words, and simplifying grammar, as in choosing, again, higher frequency constructions, but not cutting out uh, connected speech. Because helping students with connected speech, even if you speak slower at a slower pace, you can still connect sounds, right? Connected speech has nothing to do with speed of utterance. It's just getting words together as they normally do, right? It's just like teaching. Imagine teaching Portuguese, like and a student asking teacher, "O que é denda?" And again, oh, it's denda bolsa, right? Imagine the challenge of teaching Brazilian Portuguese, right? I would never do that. Yeah. So get students to listen to connected speech, because listening to connected speech and understanding connected speech will help them in both their pronunciation, so that they sound more natural. It'll help them with fluency, because, well, connecting sounds will make their speech more fluid, and it will also help them with listening, right? Because if students want expect to listen, what is the time, they will never get it, right? Because no one says that. People say, what's time, or what's the time, right? So teaching students that what's the time, it's usually said as what's time, will help them understand this when they hear it, right? Don't patronize. I think this goes together with oversimplifying. If we teach kids for a long time, you develop this caretaker talk, right? That you speak to kids very kindly with a soft voice, and come on, like we end up like liking our kids, and we end up loving them, right? So we talk to them with a lot of care, right? So this should be avoided when teaching adults, for obvious reasons, right? So don't call them kids. So, hey, kids, yeah, no, I know it's because you love them and because you're used to that, but yeah, don't. I think we should be careful with that. don't remove fun from the class. We get this, I don't know why, but sometimes we get this idea that an adult lesson should be very straightforward and serious. Because, come on, we're all adults. We're not going to play games in class, right? I understand the issue because we don't want to treat them as kids. So I think these two items, patronizing and removing fun, they go together hand in hand, because we don't want to patronize students, and we feel that if we bring a game to the class, we might create this childish feeling of the lesson, right? But I believe including the element of fun, of enjoyment in class is paramount to learning. Like, I don't remember who said it, but it's not my sentence. People don't learn from people they don't like. Students don't learn from people they don't like, right? So the classroom environment has to be engaging. And fun doesn't mean running to the board to write something or drawing. It can be an engaging discussion. It can be a TED Ed video cut into pieces so that students can watch a bit, discuss, work on vocabulary, watch another bit, work on speaking sub skills, and then at the end of the lesson, they will present a small TED Ed like session using the vocabulary and the speaking sub skills that they analyzed in the video. So this is fun, and it's not child fun. It's not children fun. I did origami, like folding. You know that I have no. Do we call it fortune teller in English? That the paper toy that you go like 1, 2, 3, 4, and then people choose a color, right? I've done that with adults as controlled practice, and they loved it. So it's, I mean, know your group, know your class. I wouldn't do it in the first lesson, right? So first lesson ever bring in origami, because I know, for example, my dad wouldn't like doing that. So get to know your group, get to know your class, and then you will know like the limits of, oh, okay, so this activity they'll find it childish, so I'm not going to do it. This activity they'll like it, so let's go that way. And and sometimes the whole thing is pretty much just changing the register. It's not changing the genre, but just changing the register. Say, um, I wanted to do storytelling with my adult learners. Well, maybe storytelling might be too childish for this group, but transform the storytelling into a live listening activity in which you would tell students something that happened to you and that they have to listen and react. So it is somewhat storytelling, but for adults, right? Don't give up. Well, again, students, they might come to class with this learned helplessness, this feeling that they're not able to learn. And we, as educators, we have to work towards not allowing this belief to sink into our heads. So even if a student is struggling a lot, give them small wins over and over again, because a student who has met failure uh, tons of dozens of times in a row, they will feel that they cannot do it. And a student who has met successes over and over and over in a row, they will feel that they can conquer the world, and that's the feeling you want. So sometimes people, sometimes when I'm talking about control practice, I tell teachers, look, this first activity, this first task that students are doing with the new piece of language, this should be easy, because you want students to complete it with the lowest amount of mistakes, like the lowest number of mistakes as mistake possible, because you want them to feel that they can do it, right? And you don't want to undermine students' motivation, right? Yeah, the wonderful feeling of achievement. Yeah, I think this goes without saying. Don't be strict with homework. Adults, they have 1,000 things to do, and if a student is paying for the course and they don't do the homework, the reason is twofold. They either didn't have the time to do it, in which case you telling them to do the homework will have no effect whatsoever, or students don't see the purpose of homework. So maybe telling students, again, going back to the reasons, and telling students why they're doing what they're doing, right, might be the key to having students doing more homework and more often. And if students are still not doing the homework, maybe the homework design is not relevant to them. So maybe doing the exact same task format that we did in class at home is not very engaging. But if I record a video, if I record an audio, if I write a paragraph, or if I give feedback to a peer on something that they did, this might be more meaningful. And again, we go back to the give up part, fostering failure. Don't foster failure. I had some teachers, like my teachers, and for some time I had this mindset of showing students that they don't know, so that they want so that they feel that they don't know, and that they feel the need to learn something new, right? So getting students to fail so that they understand, that they feel that they have something to develop, and then you come and you teach them. For some time I believed in that, but I feel that this will only give students this feeling of continuing failure. So the idea is not having students fail so that they can succeed afterwards, but getting students to succeed from the start, so that they this will boost their confidence and will help them carry out the process of learning. Still, yes, Bruno, failure is part of the process, right? Failing is part of the process, and students are going to fail. So, despite our best intentions and our best efforts to get students to be successful from the start, they're going to make mistakes, right? But showing them, giving them opportunities for small wins right from the beginning of the lesson, and trying to carry this streak of wins throughout the lesson is much more motivating than failing and failing again and trying to improve, right? And with this, we go back to our task. So adults can benefit from knowing the lesson aims. True or false? Yeah. Uh-huh. Adults can have higher effective filter when compared to kids. Yeah, that's also true. Adult learner is an accurate way of pulling together 18 plus students. Yeah, that's false, right? We know that students of different ages, they will have different characteristics. Adult learners can usually handle abstract rules and concepts. Mhm. Teachers should be as strict when dealing with homework. True, false. Okay. It's okay if you disagree, and if you disagree, send me a direct message. I'd love to talk about it. Okay. And students must face failure before they can succeed. Yeah, I believe this is false, right? I think students can succeed from the start, and this will help boost their confidence, right? If you're teaching, say, for example, if you're teaching a test, teach, test lesson framework, yeah, nice job, Gustavo. You can get students to try the task first, and they will not actually fail the task, but they will feel that there are gaps that need to be filled so that they can do it better. And then you will teach them and you help them with these gaps. And then the second time they do the task, they'll do it better, right? So, yes, there is a bit of not failing, but some struggling there, right? And this is it. if you don't know Troika, we are a company based in São Paulo. We work with school management. We write and edit material for language teaching, and we train teachers. And we have a bunch of courses at Troika, and all of them are being online now due to our current situation, right? Um, Click the button above, subscribe, like, share this video, and come visit us at Troika. Okay, and let me check your questions. If you have questions and additional information about me, um, can you give us additional information about this topic? Um, okay, so if you're interested in continuing this conversation, I wrote a blog post for Disal. It's the same title. Are we teaching adults the same way we're teaching kids? So do check it out. Bibliography on andragogy. That was the biggest challenge when preparing this. It's very hard to find books and resources on andragogy. I was reading, I was going through the books I have at home, and most books they have a page or 2 or 3 paragraphs on adult learners, right? So it's actually just I got some from Penyur, I got some from Jeremy Harmer, some from Jim Scrivener, some from a lot from H. Douglas Brown, to be honest, some from my personal experience, right? Let me see your questions. If um, okay, let's see. Super, thanks, thank you. um, True, false. Okay, if learners do not. Okay, this is not a question. Personalizing homework. Okay, so Sonia mentioned personalizing homework. I think personalizing everything, to be honest, is a great idea, right? It's much more meaningful and much more engaging if what you're doing is personalized and not like this rote exercise that the teacher printed online, right? I taught supporting bibliography on andragogy. Sorry, that's very hard to find. Um, Questions. How can we prepare the students when it comes to Cambridge exams? Okay, preparing students for Cambridge exams. I think that the key for exam preparation is that you need two sides of the same coin. You need language development and you need test taking skills, right? So I don't think this goes into the andragogy point perspective, but carrying out a needs analysis with your student to see if they still need language for the exam. Because if the student still needs language, so say the student is a B2 student trying to take the CAE, training this student to take the test, so giving them test taking skills, will not help the student pass because the student is not at the exam level yet. So you would need to work with language first. And while working with language, some of the tasks that you'll carry out with the student throughout the lesson might be exam tasks so that they get language preparation, language development, and exam preparation at the same time. Um, how to do the activity cycle and its repetition work on one-to-one classes? Oh, this is a great question. Love it. Thank you, Lucas. Okay, so repeating the task in a one-to-one situation, you would need to change something, right? So that because you cannot change pairs because it's only you and the student, but maybe change the situation a little. Say, we're going to do this again, but instead of going back to telling a story to your friends at the bar, like you're telling a funny story to your coworkers at a bar. Student carries out the task, you take notes and you give them feedback. right? And you say, okay, let's look at this, this, and that. This is good. Do it more often. This was nice. Do use that again. But we should correct this, 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 and that. Okay? Good. Now you're going to do the same task, but you're not at the bar anymore. You are at the office. They're still your workmates, and you still want to be fun. How would you tell it? Give the students some time to think, to prepare, and do the task again. It's the same task, but slightly different. Okay, this is a nice question too. Neri Santana asked, do you believe it's important to tell them the nomenclatures all the time regarding grammar? This is an adverb, this is an article, etc. No, because I don't think this is relevant to students. Most students, they just want to speak the language, right? At least most students I've had, they only want to speak. They might want to write a little, so they want to write emails or reports. I'm working with this group of teachers in an international, in a bilingual school here in São Paulo, and most of the work that they said that they would need in their needs analysis was speaking, presentations, and writing emails and reports, right? So if the student asks, oh, teacher, what kind of word is this? Do tell. But if they don't ask, I just think it's extra information. I don't think it's very useful for students. Cynthia asked, how about brain plasticity, a myth? Cynthia, to be very honest, I'm not completely sure of what brain plasticity means. So I'm sorry, I don't know how to answer your question. Okay. Okay. Okay, folks, any other questions? I think we can call it a day. Yeah. So, folks, thank you very much. This was lovely. Loved being here with you. And see you around. See you at Disal. See you at Troika. Okay. Goodbye. See ya. Thank you.